Ho, 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 cheeky monkeys.
Toppy.
It's Bergkamp. That's magnificent.
Well done. Bye-bye.
Be like the Arsenal. Be ambitious. Come on.
Hello and welcome to a Bergkamp Wonderland. We are an Arsenal podcast, and with me tonight I have the myth, the legend. It's only Andrew Fife. All right, Fifey, my darling, how you doing?
Very well, thank you, Daniel. How you doing?
As long as I don't fuck the intro up, that's fine.
Have you noticed I only seem to appear on the pod after we win big games against our rivals?
Well, that means you need to be on every single week then.
If we play a big rival every week, I'll be on every week, especially if we win. So,
well, with Jason Davis is going to start up a DL Piero Wonderland now that Ramsey has gone to Juventus. So, been the fan of Italian football that you, me, and Chris and a few others are. We should start that one, shouldn't we?
I like that very much. I think we could, certainly do some rivalry to Horncastle and his crew and his mafia crew.
You don't have an Italian team, really, do you? I know you like AC Milan or AC Milan, as you call it.
AC Milan. No, I'm actually. That's one thing. I'm actually really agnostic when it comes to Serie A. I've wanted to really support it, and I said to Charlotte, my fiance, at the start of the year, this year I'm going to make a conscious effort to try and support a team. And we go to Italy quite a lot, and we were in Naples in the summer. But then I just really didn't like Naples, and I was like, I just can't support. I can't get behind this team. It's a shithole, and I've just not been. And Juventus are too much like Manchester United. Roma, perhaps, are most similar to Arsenal, apart from they're not very successful. I'm not sure. It's too difficult to decide. I just like them all too much. It's like randoms trying to decide which is your favourite sweet. I can eat them all day. I don't have a least favourite or a most favourite, to be honest.
Well, if you ask me, John or Chris, it would say don't support Inter Milan. It's a lifetime of pain.
So that was one thing I did notice, and apologies before going off on a tangent before we even started the pod. Tottenham announced today, and John will hate this, but Tottenham announced today they're opening their new stadium by playing the Inter Milan Vets team, and I thought it was quite fitting that Tottenham are opening their new stadium by playing against the Italian bottlers playing against the English bottlers. There's no two biggest bottlers in Europe between Spurs and Inter.
Knowing Spurs and their devious ways, I wouldn't be surprised if a team full of veterinarians turn up. But yeah, all the fans think there's going to be the likes of Yeri and that lot. Anyway, we should get on with this. Next up, I'm going to go from left to right. It's Andrew. I'm not going to say your surname, Andrew, because I'll only murder it. Who has been on, Fife has grilled them all, and Andrew has been on one transfer deadline day, and he has done one of the live shows. Do you remember which live show it was, Andrew?
It was a Europa League game, one of the group stage games this season. But to be honest, I can't even remember which game
that says it all. Yes. How are you? You all right?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Yeah, very good. Not too bad. Yourself?
Oh, fat and bald and miserable, and arthritis is making my life a pain in the arse. But there again, if I said I was good, people wouldn't like it, would they?
Of course not. Can't have that.
No. Well, next up, we have Ryan in Chicago. I've already asked him what team he supports in MLS, and you had a little story. Do you want to tell people about the Zelalem story, Ryan?
Well, Zelalem's going to Kansas City, and there is a U20 player for Kansas City. His name is Juan Kuzan. I used to coach him when he was much smaller, 6, 7 years old, and I never thought. I mean, he had some talent, but he was just always very small. I mean, he's still probably small. I think he's only about 5'8", but yeah, he's going to play with the U20 U.S. international I used to coach, and I played with his father on our college team.
So what's the chances of you contacting him and getting Zelalem to do that? Any chance of that?
No, that's close to nil, I would say. Although one of my teammates coached him much longer than I did. I stopped coaching only a few months into it because I couldn't stand children.
Don't feed him that.
And he's a U14 coach for the Chicago Fire, so I think he's in contact with him still. So I can contact him and maybe get Zelalem to do the no.
Oh, imagine that if he could do a video of that. Wow, that'd be amazing. I think at this sad moment in the world of history of Arsenal, we should have a moment's silence for the Gideon Zelalem who has today left Arsenal and left our hearts.
Yeah,
but
it's
never our minds.
Disappointing. That's for sure.
I'm so sad. I had such hopes for him. Never will the manana be said again.
Oh, it'll be said again.
Not every single time. So people might not know what that is. There was whenever someone said Ellen, I would go minute, and then for the rest of ABW history, every time someone said it, they said it. And because often we have little in jokes on here, and new people don't hear it, but just because it rhymes and it sounds good. Like there's quite a few little things like that. Right, we're going to move on. We'll start with Mr. Fife, the Man United game. We only went and beat them 2-0, Mr. Fife. So what was your thoughts on the game?
We did. It was a thoroughly enjoyable game. So I didn't sit in my usual seat this time. I decided to let the guy who sits next to me, his father was in town, so he took my 2 seats, and I got a new perspective in the upper west tier, it was actually a bloody good view of the game. I thought we were in a solid performance. There was a lot of very mature player. Performances all over the field. I think Leno now is really coming into his own. Not only just in terms of some of the saves he's making, I think that double save against Tottenham the other week was one of the best saves I've ever seen, but he's bringing a maturity to that defense, the way in which he marshals the defense and the way he's got them lined up and the way he talks and communicates with them. I don't think we've seen a goalkeeper as good as him in that sense since Lehmann. I think Ainsley, Maitland-Niles certainly in that second half put in one of the best shifts I've seen from him, perhaps ever. When United made a couple of their transfers, a couple of their subs, and Martial came on, I thought, wow, we're really going to be up against it here. Especially when it was 1-0, I think Man United are really going to throw the sink at us. But and they made some tactical changes, moving Pogba away from that left-hand side inside, and I thought he was really going to be up against it, but he managed to completely none of all of the attacks on that left-hand side. Koscielny, as ever, was fantastic. I think the midfield battle was the one that was. Before the game, when you saw the lineup, the feeling was very much we're either going to win this 4-0 or we're going to lose 4-0. Ramsey and Xhaka were very controlling in that midfield. I saw Ramsey got man of the match. I was slightly surprised. I thought personally I would have given it to Xhaka. He was extremely commanding. His passing was on point as ever. And one thing I noticed about him is, and perhaps in the last few big games, and one thing we should give him credit for is actually he seems to have cut down on the lapses. With Xhaka, I don't think his talent's ever been in question. It's just his ability to maintain that kind of mental stability or that state of mental awareness at all times, which he had lacked at key times. Whereas now in the big games, he's really rising to the occasion. And that last-ditch tackle he put in on Rashford in the first half, for me, that's just as good as his goal. That was just as important. And, he very much deserves credit there. I thought also, Lacazette up front was sensational, very unlucky not to score, but the opportunities he made for himself in the first half and the way he danced through the players on the Man United back four, it was an extremely, fantastic performance to see. I think there's been a lot made by pundits. There's been a lot of pundits, neutral pundits, I should add, who believe perhaps we got lucky to some extent. I would disagree. I think, Man United clearly had opportunities to score, but the form that they're in, they've just beat PSG, right? They're a fantastic team. Of course, they're going to create opportunities to score. So did we, outside of the goals we took. Lacazette had a couple of very good chances in the first half, could have scored to make it 3 not too long just after the penalty. So, all in all, it was a fantastic performance. I think Mesut as well, was into everything. And this is the kind of game and that's the kind of performance. And I'm not saying, we wouldn't have seen this last year. Clearly, we did rise to some big games, but this, that was exactly what season ticket holders pay their money for and fans pay their money for, and why people get up at stupid hours, across the world to see it. There's a real pride, and just one little bit if I can. My favourite bit, it was when just before Xhaka's goal, the Man United fans were 10 seconds into their singing of Robin van Persie. So we managed to shut them up as well. But yeah, fantastic result, fantastic tactically. Everything I thought was spot on.
You're saying about Xhaka, and he's struggled at times. When he came from Borussia Mönchengladbach, which is our John's team in Germany, he was captain of that team, playing in the central midfield role. The kind of, I suppose people might call him, is it the water carrier, where you take it from the defensive midfielder, you give it to the more attacking midfielder. And then when he came to Arsenal, this is his 3rd season there, he played 46 games, 4 goals the first season, 48 games, 3 goals the second season. This season, he's got 4 goals in 31 games already. But the first 2 seasons with Wenger, far too often, he was played in that defensive midfield role, and that's not his position. And you ask any player to come to a new club with new players and new everything and go, right, that position you're used to playing at your old club where you were captain, no, you're not doing that here. And so many other fans were on his back. And me and John regularly went, look, this isn't his position. You play him properly. And this season when we've seen Torreira come in and Torreira do that role of the kind of defensive midfield, the one to get the ball off of people and then pass it to him, and then Xhaka will pass it around. Do you think that's made much of a huge difference with Xhaka playing in his correct position a lot of the time this season? Andrew, 5.
Yeah, I think you're certainly that. I think that definition of him being that kind of, and you see him do it for Switzerland as well. Actually, at times being that kind of that carrier of the ball, the water carrier, receiving the ball from the centre backs and playing it to the more perhaps creative players. It seems he's and clearly, let's be clear. On the weekend, he had Ramsey next to him, and he didn't have Torreira. But we didn't seem to play with, we didn't have that defensive midfielder approach as much. They both took it in turns to. He certainly seemed to have the confidence. His range of passing now is it's fantastic. The way, and I have been a critic of Xhaka in the past for his lack of mental I guess awareness around him at times, but his ability to play some of he starts so many attacks from just. He's the quarterback in that team, right? His vision is unparalleled. His ability to hit a ball, 40, 50 yards and land at the feet of the player he's aiming for, or to even look to find, to play balls into space in and behind wing backs. It's a fantastic asset to have. And the Arsenal and the range of his passing, I think in that kind of water carrying role is just limiting, his output and his ability to, and that's probably why we found with him, making so many silly and rash tackles and getting himself booked and sent off at times, because we're fundamentally asking him to play in positions and do things that he's not used to. If you asked a centre forward to go and make these kind of tackles, they as well would be making stupid and rash mistakes. So I think we're finally seeing the best of him. It's taken us some time to bed in. As you say, we haven't played to his abilities, but actually I think now he's definitely one of the players who's actually standing up and making themselves counted in these big games.
But he is still prone to doing that, like he did in a couple of games ago. Centre of midfield just passed it to one of their players, and you think, well, what is that? If he could cut that out of his game, I think every Arsenal fan would love him, wouldn't they?
I think sometimes the biggest issue we've seen with him is that when we have asked him to play that defensive role, where he might not read that as well as someone who is, trained from a young age to read that. He will quite often run with his man to a point and then stop because he believes that the danger is finished. And quite often we've seen opposing attacking midfielders run in and score where he should be marking them. I think that was quite evident in Man United in the home game recently in the FA Cup, where they destroyed us on the counter-attack. And I think Man United knew going into that game that our players, a midfield two of Xhaka and Guendouzi, they're not going to track back. Neither of them have that ability, or to. And this is one thing, perhaps, why they can't particularly play together, because I don't think either of them see danger behind them particularly well. For all of the assets they offer the team going forward and their ability and their vision looking forward, they can't see risk behind them. And so when you play them together, it does leave you exposed. And I think we've seen that in the past. It is, as you said before, very clear he needs to have a midfield partner to help him and bring the best out of him. But I think that's true of many players, right? You can say the same about Alonso. He needed Mascherano. Gerrard arguably needed both Mascherano and Alonso to bring the peak out of him. It's very much you need that kind of complementary player. And a team, like Arsenal, who do find themselves under pressure so often, it's a tall order and a big ask to put that kind of the weight of that defensive shoulder onto or the defensive weight onto someone's shoulders who just doesn't have that in their locker. But what he does bring, we shouldn't overlook his range of passing is phenomenal. His ability to move the game from defense to attack, in the space of seconds with a 45. That's just one thing that other teams don't have in their squad. We have, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the league in that sense. His ability and his range of passing is unparalleled.
Jolly good. Now, occasionally, dear listener, I will say Andrew, and then I'll say 5, because on our Hangouts, we've got Andrew, and Ryan, because there's 2 Andrews here. And me, I get confused between Josh and Ross. I get those mixed up. So next up, Andrew, what was your thoughts on the Man United game? And is there any particular player you'd like to talk about, like Mr. 5 was waxing lyrical about the wonderful Mr. Xhaka?
So I mean, first of all, I'd start off by saying, the Sunday morning, I woke up and for some reason, I know it's quite late, because there's all the build up in the week, but that Sunday morning, I sort of woke up, I got out of bed, and the first thing that came into my head was, this is a massive, massive game. Like, this makes or breaks what we're trying to do in terms of getting into the top four. So straight away, the sort of nerves and excitement, both at the same time, hit me then. And watching the game, I mean, Five's pretty much covered most of the points there in terms of the game in general. It was a fantastic game to watch. I think, firstly, picking up on the point about us being lucky that the pundits are saying, etc. I think, Man United had their chances, but how many times have we played these big games, especially this season, and we've come away saying, oh, we were unlucky, that should have been a penalty, that wasn't a penalty. You look at the Spurs draw, you look at even the loss away to Chelsea, our second game of the season in the Premier League. We lost 3-2, but we could have easily won that one 3-2 just as easily. So I think that point applies just in these big games in general. When two big teams play against each other, it's just these fine margins that really decide them in the end. And there's usually a contentious decision, etc. In terms of a specific player, though, I think Ozil surprised me. I think eventually United sort of changed their system and switched it up, and as the game went on, especially in the second half, he sort of got fizzled out of the game. They sort of marked him out of the game. But I think especially the first half of the match, he was absolutely instrumental in subtle ways in quite a lot of our moves. He was tracking back and trying to put in tackles, which we very rarely see from him. That's sort of the one main criticism from him. But I think he worked really hard for the team, which is something you don't normally say about Ozil. So I think that definitely plays a factor, because if Ozil's tracking back and running, then everyone's going to track back and run. Everyone's going to put the shift in, because you've got to work hard in these big games to win them. It's not just about getting your passes accurate and all of that. It's also about, do you have the mettle? Do you have the steel to just jump into the challenges, put your body on the line like Xhaka did with the tackle that nearly injured him? And I think Ozil really showed some of his better qualities in areas that we haven't normally seen from him. So definitely think that was a massive factor in us getting the victory there.
Lovely, I agree with all of that. Very well done, sir. Ryan, what's your thoughts on the game? Is there any particular part or performance that you'd like to talk about? Anything stood out for you?
Ramsey, I thought, was immense. He bottled up Pogba. He ran up and down the pitch the whole game. He was irrepressible. He was bright. I just have to lament that he's gone after the year, but that's enough of that.
Don't you start crying?
Yeah, I know, my mistake. But the whole team, for that matter, they were amazing. To be honest, I was surprised with the lineup. I did not foresee the four attacking players and Ozil, Ramsey, and then the two strikers. So that surprised me, and it also worried me. But 2 minutes in, you could tell we were on top of them. We were all over them. Whatever Emery gave them or told them before the game worked to perfection. I loved every second. Well, I can never truly enjoy those matches. I get too nervous. I guess you could say I get too anxious watching us play the big teams. But it was the performance of the year, I think, all the way around. The whole team. Socrates was amazing. Leno, huge saves. Koscielny was immense. Then Ramsey running up into Xhaka with last-ditch tackles. Even Monreal had he ghosted through midfield one where he ran by 3 or 4 of their players. I was truly impressed with the whole match, the whole game. It was outstanding.
Thank you. I was just thinking about, I didn't realise how amazing we have been at home this season. I'll give this one to you, Mr. Fife. In the Premier League this season at home, played 16, won 13, drawn 2, only lost 1 game. And when that was against the best team in the league under the manager's very first game. And we've scored 37 goals at home. We've got the third best goal difference. We've only conceded 12 goals at home. And when you can look at the fact of how many goals we've conceded overall this season, do you think it's back to Fortress Highbury, or should we rename it Fortress the Emirates?
I certainly think we've shown an improvement and a solitude. How much what you want to attribute that to. I know certainly some people felt that the atmosphere, the atmosphere last season had fallen away to such a point that teams felt they could come here and quite comfortably win where they probably can't now. But we just defensively we look much more solid. I know there is some kind of internal debate between our WhatsApp group as to the capabilities of Socrates, but as a unit we seem to be defending much better. Yes, there are probably too many last-ditch tackles that are needed to be made. Albeit you are regardless of how good you are defensively, you'll be making them against Man U. But we do look a lot tighter in terms of we give away fewer opportunities. A lot of the stuff we were talking about earlier about Xhaka, we do seem to be, the United lost this season at home in the FA Cup. Now, I know that kind of falls outside of the stats you gave because it was league only. That was such an outlier in the sense that we were, for much of the game, outsmarted tactically by an opposition who, on the counter, bullied us. And that's really rare to see now at home because actually, I think that defensive solidity that we have, underlying, our core attacking capability is much stronger. Socrates and Koscielny seem to have a very good relationship. Both are, relatively mobile, and I think as Ryan alluded to as well, even Nacho had a very good game in that role. He seems to be, much more comfortable in that position than the one player we haven't really spoken to much is the guy. Who am I on about now? Sorry, out on the left. Who's the left back again? It's
Kolasinac.
Yeah, sorry, I had an absolute mind fart. Yeah, Kolasinac, I don't think is playing particularly well at the moment, but ultimately, we are much stronger, and I think I like the fact that we are playing with three at the back in these big games. It fills me with a lot more confidence. I thought that we were far too open and far too exposed in that game back in January, and we've certainly learned from that. I think one thing to Ryan's point about not enjoying these games and being nervous, it certainly felt like there was a cagey tension in the ground, and it wasn't until that second goal went in that the atmosphere really picked up. Now I know doubters would suggest that the atmosphere in the Emirates is never the best, although I would counter that for big games the atmosphere is usually fantastic from the first minute. But it really felt like this was a £60 million game on the line, and when that second goal went in, just the atmosphere was terrific. But to that point, you could hear a pin drop and it wasn't just same old the Arsenal fans being quiet. It was this. I think people really understood the magnitude of what was at risk there. And it just comes to show that another fantastic home win for us. And that's why we've got ourselves back into the running for Champions League.
Ryan, Fife was talking there about our home league record, and we are third best in the league by, it's Man City on home form alone. Man City 45, Liverpool 41, us 41, and Chelsea 32. We're 9 points ahead. But you look at the away form. Now, I'd like you to talk about why you think our away form is so bad. We are 9th in the away form. 1-5, drawn 4, lost 5, scored 26, conceded 27. We've got 19 points away from home. Have you got any idea what could be the explanation for that, and how do we turn it around? You don't say no. You don't know.
The first thing that comes to mind is Emery hasn't quite got a grasp on the league yet, so he's a little more cautious on the road. And I know we've got a few games coming up in a row on the road, so the statistics might be a little skewed against us because we've had, I think, more home matches than we've had away matches so far. So it might regress or progress to the mean, depending on how you look at it. But from memory, thinking about it, I think I've questioned some of Emery's lineups on our road matches, he being just too cautious. And I think it's because he didn't quite understand the players he had yet. I'm speaking earlier in the season, and he didn't quite understand the league yet. So he set up more cautiously, and teams got on top of us, and they took advantage accordingly.
Okay, Andrew. Ryan was just on about a few of our upcoming games away. I just looked at our final run of Premier League games. We have 5 away, 3 at home. Do you think that could stop us getting top 4?
Yeah, I mean, I've also seen that we have these 5 away games, and I've heard people say, "Oh, we've got the easiest run in. We don't play anyone in the top 6." But I think those 5 away games could be just as difficult as playing someone in the top 6 for us specifically, because as we said, we really struggle away from home. You look at results like the West Ham result, etc. And I think that we really need to be able to find a resilience in those sorts of games. Firstly, we can't afford to lose, but it's almost getting to that point now where draws are no good as well. So we really need to be able to sort of sort ourselves out in terms of the away games. And I think there's definitely points to be dropped there if we're not careful. I would like to think that we can win all of them, but based on our away form, I think that would be a very optimistic way of looking at things.
Luckily, some of these teams are on a little bit of turmoil. The Wolverhampton game has have to be rescheduled. I don't know why we're not playing it Sunday. There's got to be some reason for that. I don't know why. But Newcastle, we're at home to Newcastle. Then we're away to Everton. Everton that's a team full of Theo Walcotts, which is quite sad to see. Watford at home at their place, that might be a tough one. And Leicester under their new manager, old Big Schnoz, that might be another tough one. And then end the season away at Burnley. Burnley are a team in form at the moment, but whether they'll make it last for another 8 or 9 games away, I don't know. Right, going back to the Man United game this time, what other points should we bring up? Because there was quite a few talking points, like the Xhaka goal. Do you think it was wind assisted? Because De Gea it looked like he was partly unsighted, but partly halfway through it went Roberto Carlos Le Tournois kind of goal. And didn't the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said, I think that Xhaka could well be part Brazilian.
You do. I think it just shows how difficult it is to be a goalkeeper at that top level, right? In terms of clearly the ball, I guess, swings direction midway through flight, and I get De Gea is he's a fantastic goalkeeper. Perhaps he's gone and he's lent on his on his left foot too early, so he's already jumped too early and hasn't been able to recover. But how the goal itself was a fantastic take from Xhaka, and it's quite rare that you see a goal go down down the middle of the park, so centrally down the pitch, so I think that there's probably been a bit of hysteria about De Gea and not saving that goal, but the number of saves he's made against us. It was only fair that he made at least one minor error. I think he's kept Man United in so many games against us. One other point I'd say about the maturity profile of the team is now I felt, and now I'm clearly obviously could be biased here, but I felt that John Moss had a particularly bad game. People were coming extremely aggravated with him in the ground, and you usually find when the fans are becoming aggrieved with the ref, it then kind of pushes another level of pressure onto the players. Just from where I was sat, it seemed like Moss was giving every single decision up until the penalty to United. Lots of unfair calls. Pogba could have been sent off. That felt like, it felt like he was the 11th man for Man United, because clearly Rashford wasn't playing, so he had to step up. And sometimes I feel like the team could have lost their head. Socrates got himself booked earlier. I felt like they could have, started to become petty and moany and whingy and feeling as if things weren't their way. But actually, I thought they showed, great character and maturity to carry on playing despite, despite it felt like, every decision going against them. I feel like we've always needed to maybe step it up and put more pressure on refs than what we do. But ultimately, that is something that having drawn a North London derby only recently, due to a litany of refereeing mistakes, it could have been very easy for them to lose their cool. But they maintain that, and I think all credit to them for that. It shows, I think, they're really coming on in character and as a team.
Right, you mentioned penalties there. The first one of the 2 penalties, the big calls for the game, was Lukaku on the right-hand side of our box. Someone referred to him as Mark Henry from the WWF. I don't think he's quite that fat, but he's headed there. He kind of turned with the ball, lobbed it over to Rashford, and Rashford was going for the ball, and Socrates, this is coming to you, Andrew, Socrates went in for the ball at the same time as Leno. There's all a bit of a kerfuffle at the goalkeeper's right-hand side of the goal. Do you think that was a penalty? Because Rashford seemed to think that it was definitely a penalty.
Are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, so you want to don't use the
I
C
couldn't
word.
give a fuck what Rashford thinks, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, definitely was not a penalty at all in my eyes. I think it was just, your typical sort of near the goal scrap in these kind of games. And I think that if you're the referee and you've got a sane head on you, which, well, to be fair, I guess can't really say that about any of our referees, but I think you've got to think that those sorts of little scuffles, they're going to happen in these big games, especially in a game of this magnitude where, every team just be, both teams are going to be desperate to be trying to get that ball into the back of the net by any means necessary. And if, there's a little bit of a spillage or a little bit of a loose ball around that sort of edge of the box near the keeper, every sort of player is going to go for it. And as you know, in the box, if you're a striker, if you're Lukaku, if you can go down in any which way possible, you're going to. And if you're Rashford, you're going to scream and shout for it as much as you possibly can. I'm sure if we were United fans, we'd be absolutely screaming at our TVs saying, how is that not a penalty? But yeah, not for me at all.
Ryan, sticking with that same penalty challenge, I'm just looking at it now on Match of the Day replay. It would look like a scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or whatever the hell it was called. You've got Koscielny doing mid-air splits, and his right foot he's virtually standing on his left foot with his right foot as high as it will go. He's like 6 foot in the air. Rashford comes flying in like he's walking on air. He's like with one of those wires in a martial arts film, and Socrates is coming sliding in, and then poor Leno must think, oh my god, that moment when you're just about to have a car crash and everything slows down into slow motion. I've had a few of those myself. What was your thoughts on the penalty, and do you think they all need to just calm down a little bit?
Definitely calm down a little bit. Definitely not a pen, if you ask me. I don't care. I'm biased, I have to admit, but not enough contact. Not enough contact, and to be honest, don't, like Andrew said, I don't really care what Rashford thinks.
That's not exactly what Andrew said, is it? He went, we've got a bit of a potty mouth.
Yeah, he could, take a hike for all I care. Rashford, I can't stand him. I can't even stand looking at his face when I see him on the TV. It's just a whiny face, and anytime a decision goes against him, it's just in my mind.
Yeah, Mr. Fife, have you got anything you want to say on that penalty before we move on to our own penalty?
So they don't show replays in the ground, and the only highlights package I've watched since was at the Arsenal.com one, and I don't think they showed that incident. So this whole palaver is absolutely news to me, I'm afraid, guys. Yeah. So I don't, and also I similarly don't care what Rashford says. He injured Holding, and he's the reason Holding isn't playing for the rest of the season.
Yes, in the FA Cup game,
which doesn't get in the league game back up.
Of course, it was at their place. Yeah.
And so So I think he needs to shut up, please.
Okay, right. I'll stick with you. We move on to the next penalty. Our penalty. You've got their number 17. Well, first of all, you've got Lacazette running into the box. He's and then you've got number 17 for them, who I think might be Fred. Is that right? And then you've got a big hulking bloke to Xhaka's right, and I think that might have been Luke Shaw, Fatty Shaw, because it looks like three people all in one. And so then I'm looking at it in slow motion, and number 17 comes in, and then his right knee touches the outside of Lacazette's left thigh. Now, he could have kept on going, but as Lacazette was running to goal and he didn't dive, he fell. What was your thoughts on the penalty? And do you think, well, obviously we were in Arsenal, they're Man United, so it's definitely a penalty. It should have been a sending off as well. What was your thoughts on that penalty?
So this is an interesting one, because when I got home, I was absolutely soaked, and I was looking at some of the social media, and a guy I know quite well who's a Man United fan, he's in Belfast, so he didn't watch the game, but he said that what he'd heard and read on like Man United social media was the biggest outrage from the game was Lacazette's dive. So I went back and I found a link which clearly showed the penalty incident. And, I thought that it was very much a complete fabrication or a stretch to suggest that Lacazette dived in any way. Now, one criticism I'd level at Lacazette over the course of this season and last is that actually, to the frustration of the fans, he quite often stays on his feet when you think, just go down. The number of times, I'd say at least 5 times, between this season and last season, he could have won a penalty when players with perhaps not less integrity but more savvy strikers would have won that penalty. Certainly Salah and Kane, and that's not to say I want him to dive, but there's certainly times where he's been too honest. I think in his first year, he took a lot of batterings off centre-backs and he was quite bemused. And he's now up for a physical challenge more. But he quite often we saw it at Chelsea a few weeks ago at home. So the idea that Lacazette is a diver is not one that sits well with me. I think this, in this specific incident, if a player in that position was looking to dive, and what you see from serial divers, from people like Son and Kane, is they will quite often leave their kind of second leg, or they'll leave that second leg that they're not leading on held backwards to try and simulate and force a level of contact to which, to then do their little swan dive. And in this case, I don't think that was there. We saw Fred clumsily came in. Now, it is a soft penalty. Let's not beat around the bush. If that goes against you, you're not happy. But there was enough contact there on the knee to unbalance Lacazette. And then thereafter, Fred's also used his elbow and the force of his shoulder to push Lacazette forward. Now, when someone like Lacazette, who's running with velocity, that he has the ability, there is a likelihood that he's going to go down. Now, some referees might interpret that as not a penalty, but, and which they're fair to do so. The idea that it's a dive, in my opinion, is absolutely preposterous. I think that, clearly Fred has used force on both the knee and with his shoulder. And it's the kind of penalty, actually, I'd say that over the last 2 or 3 seasons, we've probably seen repeatedly give against Arsenal. I think we have seen so many soft penalties given against us that we would probably, as Arsenal fans, just accept, actually, yeah, that's a penalty. And we would probably roundly be blaming, Nacho Monreal or Xhaka or whichever, idiotic culprit had given away another penalty, because we're just so used to penalties like that being given against us. I think that, it's fair game. If the penalties we've had against us this season, the Zaha's at Palace, the 2 at Liverpool, if that's not a penalty, then half the ones that go against us aren't. So completely comfortable with it. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. I don't think Lacazette's a diver, and I think it's about time we started getting some soft penalties at the Emirates.
Very true, Ryan. I haven't asked you about this penalty yet, have I? Because I lose track of what I'm saying.
Not yet.
I haven't asked you about it, have I?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Right, looking at the replay from behind, like Fife was saying, Lacazette's running in a straight line with the ball on his right foot. Fred comes in from the left-hand side in towards the right, and I didn't see it until Fife just said it. He definitely puts his right elbow just into the back above Lacazette's right buttock. Don't get excited, ladies, if you're any of you listening. I said Lacazette's buttock, and that's more than enough to set quite a lot of gentlemen off. What was your thoughts on the penalty? I think it definitely was. I mean, you can't have contact with the knee against his thigh and then shove him in the back with your elbow and a world-class striker running at goal at speed with the ball, can you?
Oh, no, I agree. There's definitely contact. The knee coming in at the angle, it would have put him off balance. And then you put your forearm elbow right into his lower back. And he might have bought the penalty a bit, but it's, in my mind, still a penalty. He's running towards the end line. Fred comes in, doesn't challenge him, gets the challenge timing wrong, puts his forearm right in his back, and pushes him. I mean, it was clear as day. I mean, Lacazette probably could have stayed on his feet, but, why bother? He bought it to a degree, but it's still a pen. It can be both. I wish people would understand that. It's not ever clear cut or cut and dried. It's not one or the other. It's not that binary. You can still buy a penalty and be fouled at the same time. And I think this is clearly the case. Every angle you look at, every replay you'll see, that's what happened, without a doubt.
Okay, Mr. Fife has just reminded us, do we want to give a little bit of love for Lacazette for giving a penalty to Aubameyang? Andrew, what was your thoughts on that? And also, Ryan was saying that Lacazette may have bought the penalty, but he can only buy the penalty if Fred is selling the penalty.
Yeah, spot on there. I think, just quickly on the penalty, I think, yes, it is probably on the softer side as they go, but as the saying goes, I've seen them given, and especially against Arsenal. With regards to Laka, giving Auba the chance to take the penalty, I think, firstly, that just sort of reflects the true sort of partnership and friendship that those two strikers actually have, which, is fantastic for Arsenal. I think, you want your two top strikers to be having that partnership. I read the Ars blog this morning, and he was talking about how, you know, when sort of you've just bought Lacazette for 50 million and then you buy Aubameyang for 60 million the next year, you know, a lot of people were sort of giving the whispers of, all clearly the manager's not been pleased with how Lacazette started, etc., etc. But you know, that's not been the case here, with Emery sort of managing to get those two to, you know, flourish with their bond on certain matches. And I think that the fact that Auba took the penalty and scored the penalty could be massive for us in the run-in in terms of his confidence. I think, you know, you could tell he was terrified, but they said that the player said that he was in bits after missing the penalty at Spurs, and that could be massive for us going into, you know, the final few games of the season, because if he can get his confidence back and start banging in the goals as much as he was, you know, sort of in the mid-season, you know, that could be huge for us in terms of not dropping those points away and getting those wins that could have been draws, etc., etc. You want both Laka and Aubameyang firing on all cylinders, really.
Mr. Fife, I'm still talking. Oh, someone else going to say something there?
No, I was just going to say one final point for me on the penalty is, you know, this, if you look at the game itself, right, Pogba could have, you know, very well been sent off by a different ref for raising his hand into Ramsey's face. You know, when we played them at home in January, Lacazette got elbowed in the face, not once, but twice. You know, Holdings had his season ended by Rashford this year. I mean, I don't feel at all bad that we've had a soft penalty against Man United. You know, not at all.
Okay, right. Have any of you played football at any kind of level where you would take proper penalties? Because the last time I played football before I sat down permanently was, I think I played for Oxmoor St John's in about 1980 away at Thongsley, and I just remember standing by the goalpost for the entire game. So I've never taken a penalty in my life. Has any of you taken a proper penalty?
Oh, yeah. You know how we have college sports that are pretty big here in the U.S. I was on my college team on a scholarship, and we had PK shootouts, and I was always one of the picked. And
okay, come to you.
I missed a few here, and I made more than I missed, but I missed a few here and there.
Ian Wright was saying on Match of the Day, for the people who don't see Match of the Day, that they showed the penalty for against Man United that he scored, and the penalty against Spurs that was saved, and the run this in a split screen. So they freeze framed it. He's got his left arm up in the air. His position is exactly the same. And Ian Wright made the point, and at no point did he look at the ball. And he takes the same slow run up and does exactly the same thing, and kicks it so close to the goalkeeper. What's your thoughts on that, Ryan? But why, as somebody who's taken penalties, did you have a particular way of taking it every time? Because personally, as I don't play football, I would stand at the halfway line, and then I would do a Monty Python Ministry of Silly Walks all the way up to the ball, flapping my arms, running around in circles, end it with a little baby cartwheel, and then I put it top left bins every single time where the goalkeeper can't take it, can't reach it. So what's your thoughts on this penalty? Both of them.
I don't like his technique. I'd rather have someone, you know, do a straight run up and put their foot through it. I know he waits for the keeper to move and then guides it to the opposite direction. Whereas, you know, I would always do a sort of short run up, 2 or 3 steps, and put my foot through it.
Did you look at the ball or did you look at the player? Because Gary Lineker I think it was Gary Lineker. No, Alan Shearer said that he used to always look in the corner that he wasn't going to kick the ball into, hoping the goalkeeper would be looking at him, looking into the corner. Did you have any tactics like that?
No, I looked at the ball. I'd set the ball, I'd look at the goal, and I'd back up. Referee would blow his whistle, and I'd do the 3 or 4 step run up and try to drive it or hit it as hard as I could to the corner I picked. I usually picked the right corner. I always rather than the left. And yeah, I don't like the finesse. I like players who put their foot through it, like Xhaka. I imagine Xhaka would have. That's why I wanted to take it when the penalty, or even Lacazette, when it was whistled.
If Xhaka took that, he could kill someone with it.
Exactly. Kill De Gea. It wouldn't bother me any.
Andrew, have you had any history of taking penalties? You can lie and say yes if you want. No one will know.
Yeah. I scored one in an FA Cup final, actually.
Did you?
It was yeah. It's nothing major. No, I mean, I've taken penalties. You know, I played for one of my college football teams for a little bit as well, and I've taken a penalty in that context. So yeah, nothing too major. I think I would agree with everything Ryan's saying in terms of the technique, and I think probably one of the best run ups I've seen in recent times is David Luiz doing a mini London marathon before he actually goes to kick the ball.
That would put the goalkeeper off, though, wouldn't it? Because people know back in the day of Bruce Grobbler, he used to do crazy legs where he'd wobble his legs around and flap his arms. I think that the penalty takers should try and do something crazy like that. Just give it full bloody chicken arms as you're running down, squawking, whack, whack, doing a little cartwheels and things. They're going to think, what the hell's going on? And then bang, you score. And if you don't score, you can look like an idiot. So probably best you don't. Mr. Fife, you are a legend at most things that you participate in. Have you got any history of taking penalties?
So, funny enough, and there are former teammates of mine when I played in the youth team from in Dorset growing up. So who listen? So what I say is regulated by the truth. I in my latter years, i.e., from under 16s to under 18s, moved to centre back, but I still took. I was originally kind of in that. I played almost as a number 10, just behind the second striker, moved to centre back, continued to play free kicks, to continue to take free kicks and took penalties from my team. I do remember missing a penalty on one occasion, and that will always that vision of missing or saving it, having a penalty saved against one of our biggest rivals, has stuck with me. Although this is how cocky I was as a kid. So I was on 17 league goals from centre back, and in the final game, I did the Ian Wright and had a T-shirt underneath it which said 18 just done it, thinking, and I went and scored, and then lifted it up and had my T-shirt off. I didn't get put thing back then, so yeah. So I was quite prolific from free kicks, and they weren't all from free kicks and penalties that 18 goal season, but yeah. I was always trying to place it into the very bottom corner. That was my technique. I thought, I wasn't going to whack it too much. I always wanted to get it. But I do think, there's been a lot of criticism about Aubameyang's technique, and perhaps, no disrespect to myself, Ryan and Andrew, but I think at the Premiership level and at that top goalkeeping level, the key differentiator is that actually goalkeepers will quite often have a decision in their mind, and they will jump. And they will know which way they're going to jump, regardless of the centre forward, which gives the opportunity. There's much more opportunity, I think, for a centre forward at a top level to wait and try and measure their penalty in the opposite direction or down the middle from where the goalkeeper is going to jump. I think where there's been a lot of armchair unrest at Auba's style, people forget that at an amateur level, because the quality of the penalties are so much lower, you find that goalkeepers usually don't have that instinct to jump regardless, and will quite often try and wait and save, and quite often will try and wait into the balls perhaps a second into flight and judge that. So I think some of the criticisms just aren't translatable. And whilst I don't think he took the best penalty in the world, and I would much rather see him knock it into the bottom corner or into one of the top corners with power. I don't fully take on board and agree with some of the criticism, because I just don't think, as I say, it translates from, it's one of those things that doesn't translate from amateur to professional football.
Whereas the number one thing when you take a penalty is get it on target, and you can't accuse him of not getting them on target. And then quite often, like you were saying, the goalkeeper has predetermined where they're going to go, and often they will dive one way or the other. It's just that the last two penalties he's taken, both the goalkeepers stood their ground and stayed in the middle, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the problem with the Tottenham penalty for me is clearly, if you're going to take a penalty against Lloris and someone of that quality, you have to have complete conviction. Aubameyang went for perhaps a little bit more towards the corner for the Spurs goal as opposed to Man United. For me, if you're going to hit the corner, you need to be hitting low and hard or high and hard. You have to have enough power on it that even if the keeper does get the right way, they're only going to power it into the net. And that, soft penalties, which are somewhere in between the middle and the corner, it's just the worst you can take. But that one against Man United, I have no problem with him taking that split second to wait and to watch, which way De Gea is going to run. I think to jump at that top level, it's almost, more of a battle of, wits and who's going to stand their ground and who's going to stand their nerve. Whereas I think at the level, we've been taking penalties at, it's more a case of I can whack it into the corner, with more pace that you can jump into that corner, as opposed to actually, a real battle.
I agree. It's a game of chicken, essentially. Who's going to blink first?
Unless you're the first player, then you can just run in and tackle the player before he's taking the penalty. almost.
I mean, and I do think there is a good debate to be had there, because when you come and see some of the, I'm going to bastardize it in my pronunciation, but the Panaka, or sometimes when players take their run up and stop, and and goalkeepers jump in that time, there probably is a debate to be had about whether or not that's fair, whether players should be allowed to stop mid run up, because it gives them that unfair advantage over the goalkeeper, who are under much more pressure. Likewise, as we said, goalkeepers aren't allowed off their line. So I do think there is, there has to be, checks and balances there. I don't think a player should be able to just stop midway through a run up, because, as you said, it's that game of chicken.
That was the thing, wasn't it? A few years ago, they would almost do the John Aldridge stutter and stop, but they were still moving their ears. Man City have got a penalty. Talking about penalties, looks a bit debatable. Guerrero's about to take it. Right, gentlemen, I'll start with you, Andrew, on the left-hand side. Your highlight of the game, your favourite moment, the bit that made you go, "Oh," give you butterflies.
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't want to say the cop-out answer and just say when Norva scored the penalty, but it probably was, because I think I just sat there thinking, if we can go 2-0 up in this game, I think we'll seal it. I really think we will. I didn't think one goal would be enough. So I think when that went in, I was just going absolutely nuts.
What's yours, Ryan?
Yeah, it was the penalty. Another one that saw my heart in my throat was the when Lukaku hit it off the bar. I thought for sure it was in when it left that little fat left back's name. I can't remember his name. His foot. Yeah, Shaw, little pudgy fuck. I thought it was in, and I was like, oh, here we go again. We got a nice lead, and they're gonna equalize, and they were on top of us at that point. But the goal, and did that correspond, Fife, right when it started pouring, or was it right before? I can't remember.
Made the gods cry.
Yeah, I was thinking, if he scores here, because I think it just started pouring, there's no way they're going to be able to deal with the elements and being 2-0 down. The game's over.
Yes. Mr. Fife, what was your, talking of penalties, Aguero's just taken a magnificent penalty, just chipped it top left-hand, to the top right of the goalkeeper. Brilliant, perfect penalty. What was your moment of the game, Mr. Fife?
I think the moment that got me off my seat the most was there was a last-ditch tackle in the area by Maitland-Niles, and it was one of those where I think everyone in the ground stood up, and that whole that camaraderie of feeling like you're in mid battle, and you've just seen one of your military colleagues, land a blow in an old medieval kind of war. It was a fantastic tackle from him. In terms of actually for the game itself, what I really enjoyed at the end, I thought Eddie came on and put in a very grown-up, I know it was only 5 or 10 minutes, but Denis Suarez, Eddie, and Iwobi at the end, we effectively had 3 very young players. And they still did a fantastic job in terms of applying the pressure on the Man United defence, keeping the ball, keeping the ball set. I think Denis Suarez especially as well looked very interesting when it came on, and I'd quite like to see a bit more of him now in the business end of the season, as they say.
And my father did a Chris Carpenter there. I made a slurpy noise. Sorry, listener. My favourite bit was when Xhaka, my cats, like at the moment, 2 sitting on the table in their beds and 2 sitting on the ottomans and keeping warm, and they hate it when I'm watching football, because the moment that Xhaka kicked that ball, I screamed, "You dirty, dirty bastard!" And then it went in, because he's a dirty man with that ball. I'm just quickly looking through to see if we've got any more replies to Fife's forum. No, because you're all shitbags. One quick bit I'd like to talk about before we move on to we'll just lightly brush over the Rennes game, which is best for everybody. If you look at our big 4 competitors and the scum at N17, 3 seasons, you can't go back too far because you've got a completely different group of players. But if you go back to 15-16, we got 11 points. And 16-17, we got 9 points against them. 17-18, 6 points against them. This season, 12 points. We've had 3 wins, 3 draws, and 4 losses. Ryan, does this show that Emery is a better manager than Wenger? Listener, do not throw things at your listening device. Stop it. Bad person. Go on.
Right now, I think it does show that Emery is a better manager than Wenger was there in the last 5 years of his tenure. He certainly is more detailed, more tactically detailed. I think he gives specific instructions to the players. So yeah, I suppose. I mean, I'm really loath to. I think the manager's gone, and it was time to move on. Referencing him too much
I know
is boring, to be honest. And comparing the two managers is nearly pointless. I mean, I guess it has some merit because they essentially have the same cast of characters they're dealing with, the team, if you think about it. But it's kind of a boring argument at this time, I would say.
Well, Mr. Fife, I did a cheeky little tweet, and I tweeted that this season, via our main 5 rivals, Emery has double the points that Wenger got last season, more points than any of Wenger's last 3 seasons, more goals than any of the last 3 seasons, more wins than any of the last 3 seasons, conceded 2 less than Wenger did last season. Happy ? So are you happy? I know I'll be having a little tongue-in-cheek thing at Wenger.
Yeah. I think that I think we're only 3 points now off of our total points tally from last season as well. And listen, let's not go overboard on Wenger. I wouldn't want Ryan and Andrew to alienate 50% of the listeners on their pod virginity session. But I think certainly if you look at the difference between how we line up now in big games this year compared to years gone by, I think and one thing I have been perhaps critical about Emery in the past is, but he's much more tactically flexible. So I think he will adapt the team for the game much more than what we've seen in the previous regime. Now, in Arsenal's early years, when you had the best players and you had the most pace and the most solidity, and you had Emery, you could go into big games and you could go in there and dominate and dictate. Now, and that's always, and I'm not wanting to have a go at Wenger, but clearly he's seen Arsenal teams being able to pick apart other big teams, and he's had the confidence in players like Vieira, Emery, and Campbell to continue that, and he continued that throughout his years. I think we did see him maybe shift things around once or twice against Barcelona when we played quite defensively, but in general, I think Wenger's probably the output of his final years probably reflected the early years, and yet the quality of the players we had available towards the back end clearly weren't able to go and dictate the terms of a game like he was in his early years. Now, Emery, I think, coming in is a little bit more objective, perhaps doesn't have the same love for certain players, and he's happy to, drop the likes of Torreira and Aubameyang for a game away at White Hart Lane, but, bring them in at halftime if he feels he needs to. I think he's much more, he's showing now a willingness to be, open and flexible to the needs of the team, but it's all relatable to the strengths of the opposition. And so, where we got annihilated perhaps against Man United in the FA Cup game, which is probably the only real major loss outside of Liverpool, it was because we were, caught on the back foot. We were outsmarted tactically on the counter, and you can see he's learned from that, and the way in which the team was assembled and the tactics were there. That actually Man United rarely hit us on the counter in the game just gone by. So I think he's done very well in that sense. There was a slight dip of form around Christmas time, but in general, I think there's a lot of fans who are very happy with what we're seeing, and if he can get top 4 in his first season, then he would have more than he would have surpassed more than what a lot of people felt was the expectation on him.
Very good, Andrew. Just looking what I call a successful season: beat Spurs at home, don't lose away. Beat Man United at home, don't lose away. So we beat them both at home and we drew with them both away. Would you say this is a good season for you? And what's your thoughts on our results against the 5 main rivals?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sort of boil my season expectations down to just those sort of 4 results like you have, but they're definitely up there with the most important. But yeah, look, I said before we even kicked the ball this season, once we got Emery in and stuff, that I said I'd be shocked if we did get into the top 4. I really thought that 5th was probably the likely area if we are going to improve, just because of how far behind we were last season. I think, there were a few issues to fix, such as, being competitive in the big games, and also the sort of quote unquote blip results against the smaller sides, if you will, without disrespect. So I think that in terms of measuring how good a season this is, I'd need to wait until the end of the season and see where we finish, because at the moment it can be anywhere between 3rd and 6th place, which I think, in terms of the feeling of the whole season, that sort of has a massive bearing on that. But yeah, definitely I've seen an improvement. I think, we're more competitive in the big games. We seem to be able to tailor our approach in terms of the setup, the lineup, etc., to who we're playing, which was a massive criticism, put against Wenger, especially in his sort of final few years. We don't have a squad like Man City's. We can't just go and dominate every game we play in, especially the big games. We've got to methodically sort of set ourselves up in a way that is suited to hitting the weaknesses of the opposition teams, and I think that's key, especially in the big games. If you know a team's vulnerable on the counter attack, set up to hit them on the break. So hopefully we do finish 3rd.
Good, yes. And also this all coincides with Arsenal not having every single player injured. The only players we know that are out injured is our right back, but we've got people who can cover at right back, our centre back, and now that Koscielny's back, we're covered there. And who's the other injury we've got? We've got Bellerin, Holding, and Welbeck. And Welbeck is the only one really at the moment that we could be lacking for, especially if we decide to start playing 2 up front. So I think having all of our players back has made a hell of a difference. Right, we're going to move on to the Rennes game now. We decided to start the game off on a high, the show off on a high. But I'm not going to let you into any names, dear listener. But one of the people turned the game off at 2-1. The other one watched it on his phone, and the other one was pissed up in the pub. So it looks like I may well have been the only person who watched every minute of the game. So would any of you cheeky monkeys, not giving away which one of you did what, would like to talk about the Rennes game? The tumbleweed.
I'll volunteer, I guess. I'll go first. Yeah. Going back to what Fife first said about the Man U game, he said it was a mature performance, and this was the opposite. It was an immature performance. Sans the first, when was the sending off? 40 minutes, 30 minutes? Because until the sending off of Socrates,
41.
They didn't really do much of anything. I mean, people were touting their wide men. I think his name's Sar, and he dribbled out of bounds a few times. He didn't really impress me at all. He had heavy touches. Iwobi had a nice goal. Torreira should have scored, should have done better at least. I think he probably kicked it at a nice height for the keeper. But then afterwards, it all seemed too familiar. The same failings for the past however many years occurred again. Immaturities, players just doing stupid things. And Emery, I think, made some really poor decisions. Having Mkhitaryan at right back, I thought was bizarre. I thought he would definitely bring on Kolasinac just to get 4 defenders on. You could have moved Monreal over and had Mustafi at right back, and that would have been far more solid because they were getting on top of us on the wings. And then the first goal they scored, that was just ridiculous. Free kick right into the wall, it comes right back to him, and he hits a ball like he's never hit before, right into the corner. That's essentially my thoughts. And I'll be the one to admit I was at work, so I was watching on my phone, so I didn't really.
Don't give it away now. They know one of these two good at 2-1.
You kind of have to. It kind of signified me being 6-hour time zone behind. I was the one on my phone.
Game.
Yeah, I basically had to excuse myself from my desk. I told him I'm going to go to the kitchen and have a coffee, and it was a 2-hour coffee break. What happened? Well, I had to go to the bathroom too, and I was talking with my friend, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it was the same immature failings. We got caught on the break for the 3rd goal, which we've seen that before. Remember the Monaco game a few years ago, though that was at home. It's like, why do we have so many people forward? It's 2-1. There's still a whole other leg to go. There's no reason to commit that many players forward. And it was a throw-in, I think. It was the same infuriating, immature, naive performance that we've seen several times before.
And it's not the first time that's happened in an away game. I've got a little stat here that I like to bore people with. Where is it? We have played 23 Europa League games, and we have won 14. We have drawn 4 and lost 5. So I did put, should we expect better, and what can Emery do to stop this? Mr. Fife, have you got any thoughts on this?
Oh, what? Sorry, apologies. I was looking at some of the pictures Jason Davis had been sending to the group whilst we'd been on air. Horrific. I won't go into any details.
It's not more of Aaron Ramsey wearing chaps and a cowboy hat, is it?
Yeah, and then it looks like a painter's radio.
Oh dear, oh dear. I was saying on what Ryan was saying that, and we've played 23 Europa League games. We won 14, drew 4, and lost 5. Should we expect better? And what can Emery do to stop this? Because last season we lost away at Cologne and Atletico Madrid, which is understandable. And this season Emery has lost away to Bate and Rennes.
Well, I mean, for one, I don't think it is understandable that we lost to Cologne last year away. I think that was a disgraceful performance that summarised much of what we were going through at the time. Given Cologne were bottom of the German league, I think we played them in December, and it was their first win of the season.
They ended up getting relegated.
Yeah, and I think that was entirely unacceptable. Albeit, I do think if you look at the Europa League last season, it was very much let's play the journeymen in the squad. You know, many of the players who featured for us especially the early stages of the Europa League, it was, your Theo Walcotts, your Debussys, those kind of guys, those players who have now mostly left the squad. I do like what Emery's doing to some extent. I think that there's, for me, losing, you can afford to perhaps lose one game in Europa. I think we should, if we are giving opportunities to younger players, and breed it and using it as a breeding ground, I think, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's a fantastic opportunity to be bringing in like the likes of Eddie and whatnot. Emile Smith-Rowe, we saw he had a fantastic game away in Azerbaijan earlier in the year. So I think there is an opportunity there to be slightly courageous and to pick players and give them that opportunity and that exposure. And, I think on the back of it, we've seen Smith-Rowe got himself, that's probably why he's out on loan in Germany now. So, which is only going to help his development. So no, I'm not that concerned that there has been some losses. I think, clearly as you get into the latter stages of the Europa League, the focus, and it becomes a lot more important because it's, effectively our way back into the Champions League. But in that early stages, actually, I'm quite open to them taking a few chances. And I'd much rather see the likes of, Eddie and Emile Smith-Rowe get a chance ahead of some of the, the players who we were giving a chance last season, the old boys who were on the way out. So, no, I think all credit to Emery.
Andrew, in your drunken state, I think I've given away now which one turned it off at 2-1. Where do you think it went wrong, the Rennes game? And was it tactics, bad finishing, or just everything? Because the own goal, I think not enough was made of the fact that it was just a jammy own goal, and then we're pushing at 2-1 to get the equaliser, and then they catch us on the break with Guendouzi going, I'm going to have a stroll back to see what everyone's running back for. Did you see that thing about the video with that Guendouzi had a 20-yard head start on Ramsey, and Ramsey still got back to our penalty area before him?
I didn't see that, actually.
Sprinted like a greyhound. Meanwhile, poor old Guendouzi's run along with a fag on the go and then a cup of coffee in the other hand, thinking, I've got all day to do this. That was a magnificent run by Ramsey. But what's your thoughts on the game and where did it all go wrong?
I mean, you look at the first few minutes of the game, and I think we started pretty well. I think, Iwobi, took his goal well. I think it seemed like it was going to be sort of the, if we're being honest, what we all sort of expected it would be, standard procedure, go and get the job done in Rennes and take home a decent result. And I think we started really well, but I think the fact that it's not just going down to 10 men, but the fact that it was Socrates that was the one that we lost, I think that was absolutely key. I think he's proven this season what an immense defender that he actually is, and how, okay, he may not be the leader that's shouting at everyone, getting everyone organised, in a vocal sense. I think he really does lead by example in terms of, I think he's been that player that people have been shouting out for in terms of taking the game by the scruff of the neck, getting in that challenge, celebrating when he gets a key tackle in, as we've seen in the big games. And I think to lose him, where he's widely been considered sort of the solid rock at the back this season, especially in the latter half of the season, you could see we were just sort of falling apart. And then, like Ryan said, the fact that Emery decided to address the situation with putting Mkhitaryan at right back, I think it was a huge gamble, a huge risk to take, and left ourselves really exposed at a time where we really didn't need to be any more exposed than we already were. So I think, Socrates, it just shows how key he is to our performances and our defence in terms of our resilience.
Okay, right. 2 quick questions for everybody. Really short answer. Starting with Ryan. Should Wenger, bloody hell, see, that's what I get for 20 odd years of it. Should Emery play a full strength team in the Europa League every single game to make sure we get to the final? And would you have Cech in goal all the way through to the final?
I would definitely have Cech in goal all the way to the final. And barring injury / suspension, I would, from here on out, play the best team possible. I think it's still an avenue into the Champions League. I mean, it's the top 4 is still tenuous, if you will. So you might as well battle on 2 fronts for the same thing.
Okie dokie. Mr. Fife.
I guess my issue with that question is, should we be playing our best team to the final? There's a loaded suggestion that we're going to get to the final. I think, let's not underestimate the huge job we now need to do at home to turn around this deficit. I think, absolutely we need to put our best team out in the next game. And if we progress to the next round somehow, then from there on in, I'd expect us to see, our strongest 11, especially in the first leg. Listen, if we get someone and absolutely tonk them at home, then fine. I'm a bit more comfortable being flexible in the return leg. But let's not underestimate the kind of the scale of the task that's in hand on Thursday.
Okay, and Andrew.
Yeah, I'd echo what the other guys are saying. I think I wouldn't really have a problem with having Cech in goal for the rest of the tournament, to be quite honest with you. But otherwise, I would look to play a full-strength team or thereabouts for the rest of the tournament, just because of, like the guys have said, it's not just the task on Thursday that we have to overcome, but even just the future challenges that we're going to have. Just look at us. I know they're a top team, but look at us against Atletico Madrid in the semi-final last season. That just shows that getting to the final or winning the Europa League is no given. I think that's my thoughts.
Okay, well, I disagree with all of you. I would think if we win every league game for the rest of the season, we finish 3rd. And that's what we need to do, or 4th. And with such a strong Europa League at the moment, I'd be very dubious about us managing to get to the final, like you hinted at, Mr. Fife. And personally, I'd play Leno in every single game because although there's no place for sentiment, we've seen sentiment by playing shit goalkeepers in cup games and ended up losing finals because of it. Right, so we're going to, as we're talking about the Europa League, the Fife's forum question is about the Europa League. So, Mr. Fife, if you can look in the chat box now, I've put in this week's Fife's forum question. And before you read out Christian Anderson's answer, once you've read out the question, I will then read out the teams that we could possibly face in the next round, going by how they've done in the first round. So, go on in.
Okay, so Christian Andreasen's. So this week's Fife's forum. I always like introducing Fife's forum. It's kind of I don't know, maybe it's an ego thing, but it's always a pleasure. So the question is, if we make it to the quarterfinals, who do you want and why? And that was a question from our John, to which Christian Anderson responds, he wants Inter, open brackets, if they're even through. I know it's ridiculous, but I want a glamour tie and hear people say they are the Spurs of Italy. So that's all good.
Well, the teams that can get through, Inter are currently 0-0 with Eintracht Frankfurt. Dynamo Zagreb are beating Benfica 1-0. Sevilla are 2-2 with Slavia Prague. Because all of it, you guys are going to answer this ask after. So when I finish reading these out, Mr. Five, ask us who we want. Zenit St. Petersburg are 3-1 down to Villarreal. Rennes are 3-1 up against some team called Arsenal. Never heard of them. Chelsea 3-0 up against Dynamo Kiev, but I don't think we can get Chelsea. Napoli 3-0 up against Salzburg, and Valencia 2-1 up against FC Krasnodar. So over to you, Mr. Fife.
Okay, so Andrew, who would you like to see us play in the next round if we were lucky enough to make it?
I don't think I would want the glamour tie, to be honest. So I think, a Dynamo Zagreb or a Slavia Prague would do me just fine.
Nice. Yourself, Ryan?
Yeah, I could definitely handle those two, though Villarreal would be a blast from the past. The Riquelme penalty that comes into my mind from years ago. God, how long ago was that? 15 years? Six.
I was there.
13 years ago. Jesus.
You were in Villarreal, so you were there in the away leg?
I wasn't there. But...
I was just about to say, no, that was the away leg, wasn't it? I was at the home leg. The last ever game, European game at Highbury, that was.
Yeah, I was at that game as well. Sorry to cut you off there, Dan.
No.
And also, it would be nice to welcome Santi home.
Indeed.
So he's not having. I don't think they're having a very good time of it this year. They look like they could be relegated. So perhaps we could bring some joy to his season for a rapturous North London middle class clapping brigade. Daniel, to yourself, who would you like to see a tie in the next round?
I'm going to go Villarreal as well, because as you were saying, they are having a shocking season. They are only 1 point above the relegation zone. They're doing nothing. Although if you go and have a look on the Googles or the Alta Vistas or even Yahoo's and do a search for Santi Cazorla, Real Madrid, and you see the performance he put up against them this season, turned them inside out, scored a couple of goals. But when they are 17th out of 20 teams in La Liga, and they've only won 5 games all season, drawn 11 and lost 11. That's the team I want. Plus, it's a Spanish team, and so Emery will know all about them. And much like the Rennes game, it's not that far away considering some of the other teams that you could possibly play in that tournament. So, Mr. Fife, who would you have in the next round?
So this is an interesting one. So I was very much hoping in this round, funnily enough, to get either Inter, Seville or Villarreal. And the reason being I wanted them before the end of March was that I had 4 work days that I carried over from last year, and I wanted to use them for an away day. So last year I went to AC Milan, AC Milan, for the away game where we won 2-0 at San Siro, and it was a great away day. And I was very much hoping that we were going to go to a nice big European team who would have enough tickets to host us, and it'd be a good event. And when we got Ron, my kind of heart sunk somewhat, because I knew, getting a ticket would either be difficult and it wasn't going to be a great away fixture. So I've got these 4 days I need to use up before the end of March, and I'm kind of hoping or waiting to see how it's going to play out, because if we don't get a good game or a good draw, I'm probably going to go to the town in Germany where I was born on a kind of soul-searching mission. But I would love us to see, if I'm trying to negotiate with my fiance now because she's in the room next door, so might hear me speaking. But we're getting married in the summer, but I do want to go on a little trip away to watch Arsenal. And San Siro is a fantastic ground, albeit having been there before. I'd quite like Seville, actually. Naples is not a place I would. The Sao Paulo.
You've already said why, because it's a shithole.
It is an absolute shithole. Their fans are rough as fuck. I literally caught someone with their hand in my pocket. Some guys trying to racket me about half an hour after a guy in a little trinket shop trying to flat out refuse to give me €30 change. So I have no time for Naples and the Neapolitan fans. So it would be either Seville or Inter, I think, because I think that there's a good chance I could get a ticket, and the game, as long as it fell within March and not April, otherwise they can all go fuck themselves. But yeah, we're getting married in June, so having to explain to my fiance why I'm taking a 7-hour round trip flight a 14-hour round trip flight to Baku to watch Arsenal potentially lose to Chelsea in a London derby. Could be an interesting conversation to have.
But what day are you getting married on?
June 15th.
Oh, because Sean's birthday, my daughter, is on the 29th of May, the day of the final. She's going to be 21 and she's having a bouncy castle birthday party. But we've managed to persuade her to have it at the bank holiday a few days before, so we're quite safe there. But that was a bit touch and go, because I'd love to see us get spanked by someone in the final. So cheers for that, Mr. Fife. And shame on you, dear listener, for not sending in more answers. You should be. Actually, we've had 4 interactions. Just going to have a look. No, it's just Jason annoying people. And no, we had 1 reply. Shame on you. And when Fife's reading out his own Fife's forum, you, dear listener, need to hold your head in shame. Hang your head, hold it. I don't mind either way.
Yeah, scandalous.
It is. Right, Ryan, over to you for listeners' questions. And the rest of us, don't type anything in the box because then Ryan will lose where he is on the list. So go on, Ryan.
All right, Fife, this is specifically for you, I believe, from our very own Carl. On a scale of 9.5 to 10, how good was this week's train service?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Ryan. And thank you, Carl. It's good to see that Transport for London is taking its customer service operation more seriously. I was 40 minutes late for work the other day. I got on I usually take the Overground line, which for people not from London is a line which runs from Highbury to Shadwell, where I then take a cross-connect DLR to Canary Wharf. The train I got on at Highbury was stuck for 8 minutes. And then before even getting to Canonbury Station, it hit what I can only believe was a log on the line, creating sparks. So we were stuck at Canonbury for 10, 15 minutes before getting to Dalston Junction, where we were stuck for another 10, 15 minutes, before they then decided to ask us to get off to go to the next train at the other side of the platform, which wasn't moving for another 10 to 15 minutes. So Carl, on a scale of 9.5 to 10, I'd say fuck off. And I will be billing you for my time, which, and I'm quite expensive. So I'm hoping that you will refund me the 40 minutes of my life that I won't get back. But thanks for asking, and keep up the good work.
How much is a single ride on the Underground?
So I pay a weekly. So basically, if you can just use your debit card to kind of tap in and tap out, but there's quite a few stops where actually there's no barriers. And because I usually get a monthly cut, I'm quite stupid anyway. So I sometimes just forget, and then they end up giving you like a £15 penalty. So I was racking up loads of £15 penalties, not out of any malicious intent by myself.
You're telling me, Carl?
Sorry?
I would say, can't you tell them that you're mates with Carl, but they'll just double it.
Yeah, totally
Carl.
So now I just get I think like an off-peak cheap single ticket might be £1.50, but I just pay like 35 quid, and it allows me to go anywhere within central London for a week. Actually, no, I now do it monthly because it's slightly more economical.
Oh, the service sounds like the service we have with our our elevated train. I live in the city, so I take it every day too, and it's terrible. So.
It is, and it's just when you have a poor transport system, it doesn't help. With poor infrastructure and the requirements of a super economy. So I mean, hopefully, Carl will reflect on some of the feedback from today, and work on it. So.
Or not.
All right, moving right along. Let's go with you, Andrew. This is from Matt L. Roberts. Should Denis Suarez be given a chance to show what he can do by being in the starting 11?
I feel quite bad saying this, but I kind of am veering on the side of no, purely because I know he's barely had any minutes, but he's not really done anything to inspire me in the limited time that he has played. I think he was pretty decent when he came on against United, but other than that, I've not really seen too much from him. And I just think with the fact that we've got, 8 cup finals pretty much in the Premier League leading up to the end of the season, and the magnitude of the Europa League games, I can't really see where he fits in, and I can't really see him being a crucial player for us in those games. Who's he going to oust? Ozil or Ramsey or Mkhitaryan or Iwobi. I think there's just too many people ahead of him who are playing so well and are in form that it would be taking a massive gamble. If we somehow manage to get top 4 secured in with like a couple games to go or something in the Premier League, which I don't see happening, then maybe, but otherwise no for me.
What say you, Danny? How do you feel about that?
I was reading the other questions. So
Oh.
where were we? Yes, I think he should do it because he's a good-looking bastard, and we need more of them on the pitch. He's like a slightly better-looking Aaron Ramsey. I know that's sacrilege to some people, but we need more beautiful players. And I'm a lover of ladies, not a gentleman, but there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, we do need a little bit of eye candy on there for the ladies because at times in the rain, the least you can do is bring on a big, good-looking, hunky, wet man for the ladies.
Yeah,
all the gentlemen, they could enjoy him as well.
Indeed, yes. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course.
To be encouraged.
And I've been thrilled since we got rid of Giroud because he was my wife's favorite player for obvious reasons. Though she despises football, she doesn't even like any sports. So I get grief just watching 5 minutes of a game. I get yelled at. Moving right along, this is from Hoppy. How do you think pitch invaders should be dealt with, and what? And I'm thinking means, and what should Arsenal or what Arsenal should do to try and stop it happening in the future? What say you, Fife?
I think it's some of the the incidents themselves are fairly abhorrent, especially the Jack Grealish incident that we saw on the weekend. And I think what we saw with the Birmingham fans celebrating as well as he was being dragged off the pitch was kind of shocking. And that's not to deflect from the guy who ran on the pitch at the Emirates, right? Let's be clear. There's absolutely no place for morons like that in the game. I think some of the calls for teams to have points deduct is a stretch too far. And I'm not just saying that as because it was an Arsenal fan. I think any team. The responsibility of the club is to have stewarding in place that is efficient, and clearly it's not. And I think we saw in the case of Birmingham, it was an old man and a young boy who took the fan off the pitch. And so perhaps they weren't the best people for that job, but fair play to them, they're in a job. And so if there is an element of a fine for a club for not being able to keep order in its own stands, then sure. The conversation moving towards point deduction, I think, is taking it too far. I think that the ultimately the responsibility lies as well with the behaviour of the fan, and so setting like a lifetime ban for that fan and for for the fan who ran on the Emirates, the fan who ran on up at the Rangers game, or the fan who ran on at who ran onto the pitch at Birmingham should all, as a minimum, receive lifetime bans. Now, if you're also running on the pitch and throwing punches, you should then face a criminal prosecution for your violent behaviour. But I think that's where it stops. I don't think we should be punishing teams. If it becomes more malignant and it's something that's becoming unshakable, then perhaps we should start looking at removing teams' abilities to take fans to away games, as you see quite happen onto the continent, making them play behind closed doors, perhaps once or twice, as if it gets really bad. But I think that's where you draw the line. I think this idea of having a points deduction is probably overboard. Although one point I did see being made by a prominent journalist was we're actually quite lucky that at the minute they're only throwing punches because there could be a lot worse that that people who may be able to get on the pitch can do to the health of the player, right? So we've been quite fortunate, but it's something that needs to be stamped out immediately.
Terrific. Absolutely. I think that's spot on, especially in the points deduction. I think that could be gamed too easily. Yeah.
And I mean, also, what's to stop an opposition fan getting into the home end and running on the pitch? Yeah. A Liverpool fan on the pitch at Old Trafford getting the Man U guys a points deduction. It's too obvious, right? I think there just needs to be a much more joined up approach, and I do think we need to see better investment in stewarding. Football's clearly come a long way since the 80s, but those stewards. I mean, the best thing about the stewards as well. I don't know if you saw in the Birmingham game. After Jack Grealish scored and was celebrating with the Villa fans, one of the Birmingham stewards kicked him, and then the steward was being escorted away by the police moments later. So clearly they were hardly bastions of the Corinthian spirit and upholding the law. It was a bit of a shit show the whole way throughout, and I think that's one area where clubs need to sharpen up.
Indeed, indeed. All right, let's get another question in. This is from Double D Ravioli. Oh, that's a great name. Now, and this is for you, Danny, or excuse me, Andrew, now that we have beat United and have a great chance to get in third position, will it be a sackable offense for Emery if we don't make it to the top 4?
I think.
Oh, Andrew, good.
I think sackable offence is extremely harsh for that. I think, yeah, we've got a great chance, and you look at the run in, and okay, we don't have to play anyone in the top 6, and if we're serious about and really deserving of getting sort of third place, for example, we should be winning all those games, or barely dropping any points in those games. But sackable offence, I think, is ridiculous. I think if we weren't to finish in the top 4, we'd still we could be just outside it in 5th year. We could be competing for it right up until the end. I think we've shown signs of progress, and we're trying to implement this new system and this new culture throughout the club. So to just sack him for that would just put us back to square one again and undo all of the hard work that Emery's trying to implement this season. So I think sackable is harsh. It'll be very disappointing because we've got a great chance to do it, but no, I wouldn't sack him.
Danny, have any thoughts on that?
Definitely not sacking him. No, that's ridiculous. He's building an empire here. I wouldn't sack him no matter what he does this season or next season. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, no, that's unless we lose every game 11-0 from here on out. It's not even
Spurs and get 1 point from 12 games from 12 points.
And it's not even a question in anybody's mind. It should be the farthest or furthest thing we think about sacking Emery if we somehow fail to get top 4. Yeah, that's absurd, to be honest. All right, let's get another question in. This is from Femster. It's actually his second question, which I like a little bit than his first question. We have about 6 players going into that magic 2 years left on the deal. With so many leaving already, how are we not going to enter the same cycle Raul promised? What do you say, Fife?
I think that if you look at the potential appointment of Monkey as sporting director and what his work at, probably more so severe than Roma, where I don't think he's done particularly well. He's come in with a mandate in his previous clubs to sell older, experienced players and bring in young, exciting talent. And I think that the turnover is going to be more rapid. I think the club, there's been a lot of talk about how the execution of the Ramsey agreement is going to be portent or manifest of what's to come in the future with some of those players. I think in Monkey we're looking at a sporting director who has history in being able to identify young talent early and players who will be able to come in and from a younger age probably be more hungry for longer term deals as opposed to players towards their latter age who are looking for those shorter term deals that give them leverage to increase their salaries. I think that's going to be kind of key and core to our strategy going forward.
Daddy, Andrew, any thoughts?
I was reading the questions from Steve and Jason, so no.
Andrew?
No, to be honest, I agree with everything Fife has said there.
Ryan, do you want to quickly read out the question from Steve and our Jason? Because if you don't, they'll get the hump. But we want quick answers to these.
Yeah, they're a bit sensitive about this, I imagine. This is from Steve, and I'll actually do them both in succession, if that's all right. From Steve, have you ever invaded a football pitch during a game or wandered onto a rival's pitch during a non-footy event? And from Jace, what are your hopes for the next 3 games? Newcastle home, Everton away, Watford away. Do we have the cojones to get 9 points? And that's just open to whoever wants to answer first.
Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? I think, yes, we can get the 9 points. And no, I've never been on any pitch because they'd stop me. But once I went in the gates at Highbury, the wheelchair entrance, and my mate Dean, an Everton fan, we had to see Arsenal Everton, and he left me at the top of the slope, right to the, if you're looking at the clock end, to the left of it, there's a real steep slope going up to the gates. He left me there, and it was cold, and I lost my grip, and I started rolling down that hill on my own. And I'm going, I can't stop. And all the little ball boys were lined up. There's about 7 of them, and I crashed into them, and he broke me and my speed. Otherwise, I'd have landed up face down on the pitch. So that is the closest I've ever got to a pitch invasion. That's a true story. And I'm sorry, you must have been about 8 back then. And if I broke your ankle, I'm very sorry. You cried. I was just grateful.
Yeah, I have never pitch invaded and don't plan on it anytime soon, to be honest with you. And then our hopes for the next 3 games, obviously I hope we win all of them. And do we have the cojones to get 9 points? You can tell Troy Deeney, absolutely yes, mate.
Fifey, you got an answer?
So I have been on a football pitch. It was, it must have been in the mid-90s after the game, though not during. I believe it was a pre-season friendly between Yeovil Town and Dorchester. So a big battle between Somerset and North Dorset. Can't remember the result of the game, but all the fans went on the pitch after, which was a hoot. I wasn't there at the time because I was actually at the FA Cup final, but I believe they had a screening of the Arsenal Hull game in the Emirates for fans who couldn't make it or couldn't get a ticket to the game. And after Ramsey scored, loads of people in the stands ran on the pitch, and the tannoy was a very angry man, informing them that they wouldn't turn the screens back on until everyone got back into their allocated seats. Which is, I would love to have seen that happen. On the subject of our next 3 games, I think that we should be winning all 3 of those. I think Watford away will probably be quite the test. The one that's not in that list is the Burnley away game. Now, they are scrapping for their lives, and they love raising it against us. I think that is going to be the potential banana skin, along with I think we've still got Wolves as well. So they're the ones I'm looking out for.
What's your answer to the questions, Ryan?
I've never invaded a football pitch. I have invaded a basketball court back in college. My college's team, hit the last second shot, and all of the students descended upon the court in unison and stayed there for several minutes, jumping up and down, acting like morons. That's the closest thing I've ever done. And do we have the cojones to get 9 points? I believe we do. We have the cojones to get 9 points. And I don't like Newcastle anyway, so I want to smash them.
Lovely. Right. We're running to, we're going to get close to the end of the pod. It's been nearly an hour and a half now. So, gentlemen's nods. I'll start out. You lot have a think about who you want to say hello to. Podcast ones goes to the wonderful, beautiful people who send us money via the live chat thing. Although YouTube do nick 30% of it because they're scumbags.
Oh, so, really?
Jamie Fitzgerald, Fitzguard, Chris Reevy, Blair Slater, Jim Howson twice, Nathan Gooner, Petito 100, Michael Hernandez, Dean Robinson 1983, Marquise Hodges, Yvonne Okofor, and Michael Harniman. Thank you very much, you cheeky monkeys, and all of that lovely money that you've sent us. As I bought a lovely new mic for John and for Jason, and I got given one by the lovely people at Fifine. That's Fifine, nothing to do with Mr. Fife. So I'm going to be doing a review of it soon when I can figure out how you do it, because we don't have editing skills. So it's going to have to be a one-cut wonder. So, Andrew, have you got anyone you'd like to give a nod to?
Yeah, I guess so. It's probably not going to be anyone new to the listeners or you guys, but I'm quite, as well as this show, I'm also quite a big fan of Gunner Blog. He does, especially on top of the contributions he makes to the Arsecast and the Arsecast Extra. He also does a little video, sort of a video on YouTube after every game. Usually tries to do it immediately or so after the game, called On the Whistle. And I'm quite a big fan of getting sort of his sort of level-headed, as always, yet raw-ish reaction to each game. And I think it's quite a good alternative to maybe some other fan opinion after a match videos that are available.
It's about 10 minutes long, and his last one got about 17,000 views. I was quite envious.
Yeah, that's the one. That's
he's
the one.
Very good. He's a good talker. Arsecast is brilliant anyway.
Yeah, so I guess that's it from me, really.
Ryan, have you got one?
I'm going to give a gentleman's nod to the last person who followed me. I don't have many followers, so
You don't want them. It's just because you agree.
yeah. And I don't want to talk to that many people, so oh well. But his name is Timeless Gooner at SmoothRod2. That was Timeless Gooner, or excuse me, Timeless Gunner at SmoothRod2.
Wow, he sounds like a smooth dude. Mr. With your millions of followers and adorers, is anyone you want to give a nod to?
Sure. So to a long time friend of the podcast, Dave Seeger. So Dave's a fantastic guy and who's had a very tough time of it lately, as I'm sure we all know. And I bumped into him outside the ground and had a brief chat. And all things considered, he's remarkably well spirited, and I took a lot of solace away and reflection upon how well he was. And my heart bleeds for him, and so a real gentleman's nod 3 or 4 times over to Dave, and also a big nod to Ryan and Andrew who have more than held their own in their losing of their pod virginity. I know it's quite a painful experience.
You were quite gentle.
I'm glad I've been well lubricated tonight after my dinner and my green tea. But no, congratulations. It was great having you on the pod, and it was nice interacting with you.
Well done, lovely.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Indeed, thank you.
Yes, and poor Dave, like you're saying, your nod goes to Dave, and the kind of puts losing 3-1 away at Rennes into kind of perspective, doesn't it? It's only a game of football, and in the end, it's unimportant.
And also, just a quick, and also even in a turn of brotherly spirit and whatnot, a shout out to Carl, who quite often affords me with more time in the morning to listen to podcasts as I'm stuck, here, there, and everywhere across East London. You extend my happiness through the disappointment of my late train. So I appreciate that.
Genius. Right, finally we're going to just round up with the million views giveaway. Now that was 1 million views on YouTube. I've since done a spreadsheet. We're approaching 3 million views on all formats now. So we're going to give bugger all away for that, because we're giving it all away now. So we had 133 retweets on Twitter and 146 likes, but on Facebook we only had 37 likes and 33 shares. First place was a bloke called Chris Hoppy Hopkins, who was just messaged me after we'd announced the shirt that he'd won the shirt, and I was just talking to him. I went, "Are you Chris Hoppy Hopkins?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, you've won the shirt." He said, "What shirt?" I said, "Did you listen to the live show?" He said, "No, I normally listen the next day when on the way to work." He hadn't even realised he'd won it, and he was messaging me. So luckily, he's in the UK. So the wonderful Gav over at She-War, go and have a look at She-War and go and have a look at his shop. I think it's My Super Duper She-War, something like that. And he has given this shirt away, and he's got it on there for, I think, nearly £300, a framed, signed Santi Cazorla shirt. So a big thanks to Gav over there for giving it. So Gav's going to package it up, send it to Chris very soon. Second place was a signed Tony Adams book, which is going to @Stevenage Gooner, which turns out to be, I think it's either Michael Hernandez or Michael Harniman, who regularly donates to the show. I didn't put them the @ on Twitter together with that name, so it's one of those two. It's a Michael someone. Third place is the socks. That's going to Imran @Imran173. He is in Boston. So I'm going to post those to him. They've been unworn, so he'll love those. Third place, our mate Akib. I'm waiting for it. Someone say it.
Akib.
Very much. Better late than never. He gave us 3 books about 3 years ago, 3 Arsenal books. And so the person who won that is Homemade Dad in Northern Ireland. And fifth place, someone... God, I'm slurping there. Someone of my family, when you're an Arsenal fan, your family buy you all kinds of shit you don't want at Christmas. So I've said, no, do not buy me a single bloody thing that's Arsenal related. This is the last thing I got about 5 years ago. It's like a metal embossed Emirates road sign in brackets, not nicked. It's a replica. This was won by @Olivineo on Twitter. And also, just like to mention, well done to all you lot. And again, thanks to Gav. And go and support Gav with all the wonderful stuff that he's knocking out on Twitter and via his website. A couple of announcements. Frimpong the legend, the myth, he retired at the end this week. He announced it on Twitter that he was retiring, or on Instagram, one of the two. Abu Diaby retired last week, and people are not making a bigger deal about the fact that Arshavin was spent the last 3 seasons playing in Kazakhstan, and I think it's Karyat. He retired at the end of the Kazakhstanian season, which I think was about September, October this year. That's 3 Arsenal legends, all retired within a month or 2 of each other. And coming up, the next thing is going to be our Arsenal review show. It's going to be me and one other person, and it'll be Arsenal v Rennes, and we just go through the possible lineups, what we think. And it's unlike everything else at ABW. It's 15 minutes long, and it's only on YouTube because it takes me an hour to put each one of these on the iTunes and the SoundCloudings. And so that'll be this Wednesday. I'm not sure who's coming on there with me. It might be one of the North American-based people. And finally, the live show, which is going to be 10 minutes after the Rennes game this Thursday. I think it's Jason, John, and hashtag fuck Ellis. So remember, people, at Ellis, MEHL, just go and tweet him, hashtag fuck Ellis, nothing else. That's all you need to do. Right, that is everything we needed to do for tonight. So I'd like to say thank you very much to my wonderful guests. Andrew, it's been a joy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you'll come back?
Of course, whenever you need.
You've got the Ethernet and the ability to talk, and that's all I want. And Ryan, thank you very much for coming on. Did you enjoy yourself?
Oh, it was my pleasure. Enjoyed this immensely, and I had a great time. Thank you.
No, you've got Ethernet. It's Andrew that didn't have Ethernet, but don't tell anyone, Andrew, that you're on really good Wi-Fi. Shh, secret. Can't quite insistently have Ethernet. And the legend that is Mr. Fife. It's been emotional, Andrew. I just want to give you a big hug. I bet you smell of Old Spice, didn't you, or something nice.
I had a shower earlier. I smell of the lemon, the lemon shower gel that makes your skin tingle for hours. So I smell like the Amalfi Coast.
I had you a bit down as a Lynx Java man. I don't know why.
Africa.
Oh, every time. Oh, if only we could end on the song by Toto, Africa. Well, I could listen to that 10 times in a row, and I often do. Thank you very much to you three. And, of course, thank you very much, dear listener. Without you listening, this would all be completely pointless. So we will be back on Wednesday for a preview, Thursday for the live show, and then the podcast. I think there might be a podcast next week. And then we're off for an international break. It is not an interlull, people. It is an international break. I hate it. It has to be done. But then we do need to give them poor little people who run around for 90 minutes once a week a bit of a lay down so they can count all their money. Right, I'm waffling now. Everybody say goodbye and wave simultaneously. Bye-bye.
Island wave, boys.
Bye. Bye.